26 centuries ago, a prophet described a prison built not of stone, but of perpetual ice. The text says that the fallen angels were chained in a place of cold and eternal absolute darkness. For millennia, no one knew where that place was, because no human map reached the end of the world. But there is a forgotten continent that matches that description with a precision that no one can ignore. The truth about Antarctica is not in geography books, but in a text that was banned for many centuries. A text that was suppressed, persecuted, and almost destroyed, yet survived to tell us something. The Book of Enoch is one of the oldest sacred writings that humanity has found on Earth. It was excluded from the biblical canon in the 4th century, but the Eastern churches preserved it in silence. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in 1947, include fragments of Enoch. This means that the Qumran community regarded it as sacred as any text from the Old Testament. Enoch was a biblical patriarch who, according to Genesis, walked with God and was taken alive to eternal heaven. His writings describe visions that no man of his time could have imagined or created on his own. In chapter 18, Enoch recounts a journey to the ends of the world under the guidance of holy angels. Describe a place where the wind does not bring warmth, but a cold that cuts like a knife without respite or pause. It speaks of enormous mountains, completely invisible, buried under endless layers of perpetual ice. He says he saw angels of fire and light chained in that place, awaiting a judgment that had not yet arrived. Those beings were not ordinary angels. They were the Watchers, the B'nai Hai Elohim from Genesis chapter 6. The Bible calls them sons of God, beings who descended to earth and took wives among humans. From that union were born the Nephilim, the giants who corrupted the earth before the great universal flood. God did not destroy them with the flood. He chained them in a specific place to await eternal judgment. Enoch describes it with words that leave no room for vague interpretation or any kind of ambiguity. They were taken to the ends of the known world, to the land of absolute cold and eternal darkness. For centuries, no one could identify that place because the ends of the world were simply a great mystery. But in 1821, human expeditions reached the great southern continent for the first time. What they found matched exactly what Enoch had described 2,500 years before them. A continent covered in eternal ice, surrounded by polar darkness and always by furious and impenetrable oceans. A place at the end of the world, separated from all civilization by natural barriers that no ancient could cross. The question that no one dared to ask was this: could Antarctica be the prison described in the text? To answer it, we must examine the specific details that the sacred text provides about that place. Enoch describes mountains of a superhuman magnitude beneath the ice, so large that they surpass all understanding. For centuries, that detail seemed poetic, an exaggeration typical of the oldest apocalyptic writings. But in 1958, an international scientific expedition changed everything that was known. Geologists discovered an entire mountain range under the Antarctic ice that no one had ever seen from above. They are called the Gamburtsev Mountains, and their size is perfectly comparable to that of the entire European Alps. They are completely buried under kilometers of ice, invisible from any point on the surface. Only modern scientific instruments were able to reveal the existence of those mountains hidden beneath the ice. However, Enoch had already written about gigantic mountains beneath the ice more than 2,000 years before the discovery. How could a man from the ancient Near East know that beneath an unknown continent there were mountain ranges? The answer that the text offers is clear. Enoch did not describe with human eyes, but with vision received from God. But there is another detail in the text that is even more disturbing for those who read it with scientific attention. Enoch describes that the watchers were not simply dead, they were in suspension, awaiting the end. The Book of Jubilees, a text related to the Enoch tradition, elaborates on that description in much greater detail. Jubilees chapter 5 says that they were bound in the abysses of the earth until the day of the great judgment. It does not say that they died. It says that they were tied up, immobilized, preserved in that state until the appointed time. The original Hebrew word implies a total immobilization, a state between existence and non-existence. According to those texts, what lies beneath the Antarctic ice is not corpses or ruins, but beings in suspension. That idea would have seemed absurd 50 years ago, but modern science has transformed that perspective. Scientists have discovered that extreme cold can preserve complex biological structures for millennia. In 2019, researchers extracted viable bacteria from 500,000-year-old Antarctic ice. Organisms that had been in frozen suspension for 500,000 years could awaken and reproduce again. What seemed biologically impossible turns out to be a possible process under the conditions of the frozen continent. However, it is important to be precise. Enoch does not speak of cryogenesis, but of divine judgment and sacred prophecy. The convergence between what the text describes and what modern science discovers is remarkable and unsettling. It indicates that the author had access to information about places that could not be known through truly human means. Let's return to the text of Enoch to examine another detail that most modern readers have overlooked. In chapter 18, Enoch places the prison location beyond the great waters of the abyss in the south. In chapter 21, it adds that this place is at the edge of the heavens and the earth, where both touch. For any ancient cartographer, that description would point to the place where the sky merges with the open sea. The Antarctic Ocean is exactly that place, the only endless horizon where the gray sky and the sea meet. No ancient geographer of the Near East could have imagined that scenario with such accuracy. But Enoch was not a geographer according to the text. He was taken there by beings who knew the world in its entirety. The Book of Enoch describes the journey as guided by angels who showed him all the secrets of the cosmos. If we accept the text as testimony, Enoch was physically taken there and described what his eyes saw. If we do not accept it as literal, the question remains as to why its descriptions match real geography. And that question does not have a simple answer that satisfies both the believer and the rational investigator. The convergence of data does not end with geographical descriptions or with the mountains hidden beneath the ice. In recent years, seismic research has revealed a massive gravitational anomaly beneath the entire Antarctic region. This anomaly, known as Wilkes Depression, indicates a continental-scale structure beneath the ice. Its origin remains a subject of scientific debate, with no conventional explanation that is entirely solid. Its dimensions exceed any known geological formation on any other continent of the entire planet. Researchers attribute it to an ancient meteorite impact, but the measurements don't quite add up. Enoch describes the prison of the Watchers as a constructed place, not a geological accident or a cave. It says it has walls of burning ice and fire, evoking something that is between artificial structure and nature. The coincidence between the anomaly detected by modern science and the description in the ancient text is remarkable. Now we must be rigorous. None of these coincidences is definitive proof in scientific terms. What is certain is that the Book of Enoch describes a place that geographically matches Antarctica. And what is also true is that beneath that continent there are structures that match the descriptions. And what is indisputable is that this text was written 2,000 years before anyone knew about Antarctica. The Jewish tradition of the Second Temple regarded the Book of Enoch as a cited and highly respected authoritative text. The Apostle Jude, in his epistle of the New Testament, directly cites Enoch as prophecy with authority. This means that in the 1st century, the early Christian tradition recognized the prophetic value of the text. However, the book was excluded from the canon in the 4th century, and the West forgot it for many centuries. It was recovered for the West only in the 18th century, when Bruce brought Ethiopian manuscripts from Africa. The Ethiopian Church had preserved it throughout the entire Christian era as part of its own official biblical canon. The text that describes the prison of the Watchers survived against all historical and human odds. And he did it in an African church that never had contact with Antarctic geography or its great mysteries. The question that arises at this point is straightforward. What do the texts say about the final fate of that great prison? Enoch not only describes the place, but also the conditions under which that prison will eventually be opened. Chapter 10 describes the sentence pronounced on the Watchers with words of very sober precision. He says they will be bound for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth until the great day of final judgment. 70 generations from the time of Enoch points, according to the biblical genealogy, to a precise historical period. Scholars have debated for centuries whether that period has already passed or if it is still to be completed in the future. What the text clearly states is that prison is not permanent. It has a duration that will come to an end. Jubileos adds that in the final time the chains will be removed and the bound will be freed for judgment. It does not say they will be destroyed. It says they will be brought before judgment, which implies that they will continue to exist. That distinction is theologically significant for those who study the prophecies about the end times. It means that there is a moment in human history when what is chained under the ice will be released. And that moment is connected in the texts with signs that the prophets described in detail and clarity. The prophet Isaiah speaks of the liberation of the prisoners of the earth on the day of the great judgment of the Almighty. The Apocalypse of John describes beings chained in the abyss who will be released when the time has come. The convergence among the different prophetic traditions on this topic is one of the most studied patterns. And at the center of all those prophecies is a place, a land of cold and darkness at the end of the known world. A place that no ancient cartographer had visited, but that several sacred writers described accurately. A region where enormous mountains lie hidden beneath kilometers of ice, invisible to the normal human eye. Surrounded by the most furious ocean on Earth, separated from all civilization by insurmountable natural barriers. A land where extreme cold can preserve biological structures for periods that defy all reason. Unknown to humanity for most of its documented history on the surface of this planet. And yet, it was described in detail by a patriarch who lived more than 3,000 years before our time. Enoch left no maps or coordinates. He left descriptions that point to a single place on the face of the earth. Antarctica is not only the coldest, driest, and windiest continent, but it is also the least explored of all. Less than 1% of its surface has been studied with the detail necessary to reveal its secrets. The remaining 99% holds what current human technology is just beginning to be able to reveal. Each new scientific expedition returns with data that contradicts the expectations of previous models. The Gambut-Sev Mountains still lack a satisfactory geological explanation of how and when they were formed. The Wilkes anomaly remains an open mystery for modern geology, despite many decades of study. Lake Vostok, beneath 4 kilometers of ice, harbors forms of life that no one would have imagined possible. With each new discovery, researchers find that their previous models were radically incomplete. The continent remains, in the most literal sense, the most unknown place on the surface of the Earth. And that is exactly what Enoch anticipated. The end of the world as a prison, not as emptiness or oblivion. However, there is a layer of mystery that most researchers prefer not to mention in public. Since 1959, 18 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty with unusual urgency. That treaty prohibits any military activity in Antarctica, but it also restricts civilian access to the interior. No private citizen can freely explore that continent without authorization from the signing governments. The question that historians do not answer is this: why such urgency to protect uninhabited land? In 1947, just 2 years before the treaty, something happened that few books record. Operation High Jump secretly sent 4,700 soldiers and 13 warships to Antarctica. It was the largest military expedition ever sent to that continent, and its official objective was never declared. Admiral Richard Byrd returned earlier than expected and declared that he had found something he could not describe. His exact words, recorded in the Chilean press of the time, spoke of an unprecedented global threat. He did not specify what that threat was, but he urged the nations of the world to join forces to confront it. 2 years later, the world signed a treaty that sealed access to that continent for entire generations. The coincidence between Byrd's return and the hurried signing of the treaty has not been officially explained. But the texts of Enoch do provide a framework within which that urgency takes on theological and prophetic meaning. If what lies beneath the ice is what the texts describe, containing it would be the highest priority of any nation. In 2004, seismic sensors detected signals under the Antarctic ice that did not correspond to any event. They were neither earthquakes nor landslides. The wave pattern indicated something more regular, more structured within. The scientists of the expedition filed the data without official publication, something unusual in the community. In 2017, high-resolution satellite images showed geometric structures beneath the ice. The US government classified the images as data of strategic interest and restricted their distribution. What any external observer can confirm is that the interest in Antarctica is not only geological. Let's return to the central text, because Enoch not only described the place, but also the moment of its final opening. Chapter 10 will be bound for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth until the day of the Great Judgment. Biblical scholars estimate that a generation in the Hebrew calculation is approximately 70 years. 70 generations multiplied by 70 years add up to 4,900 years since the time of Enoch. If Enoch lived approximately 3,300 years before Christ, that calculation places us close to today. We do not claim that the date is exact. Prophetic texts are not calendars, but signs of guidance. But the fact that this calculation points to our era is not something that scholars on the subject can ignore. The Apocalypse of John, written 1,000 years after Enoch, describes exactly the same event under a different name. It speaks of the angel who descends from heaven with the key to the abyss and chains the ancient adversary for 1,000 years. After those 1,000 years, the text says, he will be released for a brief time before the final and definitive judgment. The early Christian tradition connected that abyss directly with the place of imprisonment that Enoch described. They are two prophetic traditions separated by centuries that point to the same place and the same forthcoming event. The convergence is not between a text and a continent, but between several texts, various findings, and multiple nations. The Book of Jubilees, the Apocalypse of Baruch, and the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs say the same thing. Traditions that emerged independently in different centuries describe the same place coherently. And that place, which none of those authors could geographically know, coincides with the real Antarctica. Modern science has confirmed the mountains, has confirmed the gravitational anomaly, has confirmed the lake. And in each confirmation, the data from the text of Enoch has proven to be closer to reality than to fiction. There is no other region on the planet that combines all the characteristics that those texts describe with such precision. Absolute cold, polar darkness, hidden mountains, total isolation, restricted access today. Everything converges at a geographical point that the modern world only became aware of in the 19th century of this era. And yet, someone described it accurately 2,500 years before the first ship arrived. That is not coincidence or forced interpretation. It is an objective fact that requires an honest explanation. The explanation that the text itself offers is the only one that aligns all the elements without contradiction. Enoch was taken there by beings who knew the whole world, and he faithfully described what his eyes saw. What was written down is not mythology. It is an eyewitness report preserved for 3 whole millennia. A report that describes a prison, its prisoners, its location, and the conditions of their future release. And that liberation, according to the text, is linked to signs that Enoch himself describes with very precise words. Signs in the sky, convulsions on the earth, nations rising against each other with no possibility of peace. Signs that any honest observer of the current world could identify without needing to force the text. We do not say that we are living the end. We say that the signs described in the text are visible in our time. And those who have eyes to see have the duty to read what the texts have preserved for this generation. Antarctica remains covered in ice. Treaties are still in place, and expeditions continue to find anomalies. Each new satellite image, every seismic survey, every new piece of data fits more into the framework that Enoch outlined. The frozen continent keeps its secrets with the same stubbornness with which texts guard their truth. And the question that Enoch left open 26 centuries ago remains officially unanswered today. What is there? The most honest answer that serious research can provide today is also the most unsettling of all. That an ancient world patriarch described Antarctica, and what he described beneath the ice has yet to be revealed. If this mystery has ignited in you the same question that drives those who study it with true rigor, subscribe now, because the upcoming videos reveal even deeper biblical secrets than the one you just saw.